Hey, welcome back, guys. We got another It's Complicated video. This one's called Defining Masculinity. Let's go and take a look.
Because a woman is soft, she's power, she's God. She's able to have a child, so you can give her the world, but it's not even big enough for her.
I hate male feminists, so.
What's the difference between feminist women shaming men for being men and traditional women shaming men for not being real men?
Tradcons are undercover feminists.
Why is it when we talk about women's issues, it's considered the war on women, but when we talk about men's issues, it's considered the war on masculinity?
Yeah, because America's bullshit and men deserve rights too. I'm not a woman. I'm not a woman who's like women rights. I will be glad to cook and clean and stay home.
I guess because women feel like they've been victimized for a long time, so they're making up for lost time. I'm not sure exactly how to put that.
I think the idea of victimization is probably the closest answer to the question, because when we talk about women, it's more about how women have been oppressed and how them as individual beings are victims, you know. But when it's men, it's men aren't ever viewed as being a victim. You know what I mean? It's like, man up, be a real man.
Why don't we consider it a war on men any more than we consider it a war on femininity?
Because if we're looking back at the women feel they've been victimized over a long period of time, if they were the victim, then that would make the men the predator, more or less.
Because we have this thing with men that we're not allowed to acknowledge that we're being victimized, that we're being attacked. Only women are allowed to be seen as victims.
Can someone be masculine but not a man, or be a man but not masculine?
Yes.
So why then is masculinity even applied to men in the first place?
I think because of traditional beliefs.
When you think about men's rights or women's rights, it's anyone who is a woman or is a man that applies to. It's like, you are a man if you're a biological male. You know what I mean? Like, an adult biological male is a man.
I think you could be a man and not masculine. You know, I think there's a middle ground there. I think we kind of push like super masculinity, but you don't have to be a masculine to be considered a real man.
So then why is masculinity even applied to men in the first place?
Because, I don't know, it's just like assumed that men are supposed to be masculine, I guess.
You know, it's applied to men because society has these expectations of what a real man is, like what a man's supposed to do. So if you're a man and you're not living up to that masculine standard, it's very likely you're going to be shamed for it.
I'm not sure how you would define masculinity anymore. And I've seen couples all the time where you can tell that the woman is the masculine. I mean, straight couples where, you can tell the woman is actually absolutely the masculine in the couple. So I don't know that it's not defined as black and white as it used to be, for sure.
Why is there so much confusion about what a woman is, but everyone seems to know what a real man is?
That's a damn good question. I mean, penis, vagina, that's all I gotta say.
Well, women have wrestled away who gets to define femininity, and they apply it to anything they want whenever they want to. Where men are still kind of stuck in the system of like, hey, you got to be a real man. Well, a real man does this. A real man does that. And both sides will come and get on a man's case if he's not living up to what a real man is. I mean, you hear both feminists and people on the right, but especially feminists will say, well, why aren't there any real men left? You know, men who are willing to step up and, you know, take care of me and protect and provide and be happy about it and be enthusiastic about it. Where, you know, women on the right are like, I want a real man, and a real man does this, 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 and that. It just really seems to be like a real man is someone who does a bunch of stuff for them whenever they want them to do stuff for them.
Why can a woman be anything she wants while a man is still clearly defined?
Penis, vagina, I don't know. I'm done with it, yeah.
If anybody says, hey, you as a woman, like, this is what you're expected to do, that's like the worst possible thing you can say. You know, it's like, no, that's not true. Women can do this. Women can do that. Women don't have to conform to this. Women don't have to conform to that. There's a lot of expectation put on the man, but none of the expectation put on the women. So it's like, women can be whatever they want, because the minute you try to put an expectation on them, especially in the eyes of society, it's like they're going to fight against it. And they will, however, fight for putting expectations on men, because that's what helps them out.
I don't know. Women are just different. They just have to be different. Women have so many different personalities. Men are just like confirmed. Like they're very simplistic.
See, that right there tells the whole thing. Men are simplistic because men are expected to act how we expect men to act, as defined by traditional society. But women have many different personalities because all that's saying is the traditional role for femininity has been pretty much eradicated. Therefore, when you look at a woman, you don't know how she feels one day or how she feels the other day or what the expectation is. Even though men might have a whole world of who they are on the inside, they view men as these simple creatures which are just essentially disposable and supposed to provide and work for them and do what a real man's supposed to do.
Women are very difficult.
Because the pressure to perform is always on men. So there's always a set expectation, there's always a set bar of what you have to do.
Why can a woman be anything she wants while a man is still clearly defined?
Because we live in a gynocentric world, and if a man had that same perspective that you could do anything you want, then it would kind of be hard for men to be controlled.
Let me tell you, if you're a guy and you live in this society and you live it on your terms and how you want to do it, there will be people from both sides who will come and shame you. The people on the left will shame you for not being a real man. The people on the right will shame you for not being a real man. Like if you're a guy and you're like, I don't think I want to get married. I don't think I want to have kids. Everybody will come by to criticize you for that. Let me show you an example.
You say you were again?
68.
You look great for 68.
I have no wife, no kids, no job, no pets, and no problems.
So what's your secret for looking so fit and healthy at 68?
Protein, exercise, and young women.
I love that. I love that. Thank you.
All right, so we got a 68-year-old guy who looks perfectly happy. Okay. We just ask him about his life. He's just like, yeah, I'm not married. I don't got any kids. I don't got any pets. I'm basically just a free agent out here doing whatever I want all of the time. Now let's look at the comments on this. The first comment, no kids? Come on, dog. No legacy and no purpose then? So that's from a guy. Now here's from a lady. When he dies, unfortunately, those young women and protein drinks won't be by his side. LOL. Everything that dude said is depressing as hell. That's from another guy. He looks like he's 88. I unlike the minute he said young women. Here's like one comment that just has a little bit of sense. This definitely triggered some people. Why are you mad at this man for living his life the way he wants to? Is he hurting you? Do you feel like you are in a competition with him? Are you jealous? I'm so confused. It feels like unless you fill in some boxes, you aren't part of the humans club. So it's like that was most of the comments from this guy who's just like, yeah, I mean, literally someone goes up to him and is like, oh, so, ask him how he's living his life, ask him why he's happy basically. And everyone's just like dogpiling on him. You know what I mean? It's like all they're doing is projecting their own misery.
It's a part of the agenda and women wanting to break into the patriarch. And the way to do that is to confuse and to defuse anything that might be perceived as masculine and not praise anything that is truly a masculine trait beyond the convenient traits.
It's a form of selective masculinity, right? It's just like, this is let's celebrate masculinity when it only helps someone else, when it only serves someone else's self-interest, whether it be the woman or society at large. But if you decide to do something for yourself, they're going to come after you. Then they're going to say you're toxically masculine.
Why can a woman be anything she wants while a man is still clearly defined?
Well, because again, like I said, the future is female and that's the agenda they want us to progress to. So that's what the narrative is. But at the end of the day, as men, we set our boundaries, we establish ourselves as such, and we're going to always be men regardless. True men knew that. Regardless, and a real woman will recognize and respect it either way.
How would you define mansplaining?
I would define it as a man explaining to a woman about something that they think they have no or little previous knowledge of.
When a man starts to push a solution rather than listening to the nature of the problem, a lot of times a woman just wants to express her frustration. Man's got to solve it, and that can be a pain. Advice when it's not wanted or when it's forced.
I feel like mansplaining kind of comes from men kind of playing this traditionally masculine role of seeing women as people who need help, or that they're not as capable as they themselves are saying that they are capable. So when a guy comes in and he starts mansplaining to a woman, it's more like, why are you talking to me like a child? I can do this. I don't need you telling me this. Nobody asked you. It goes into the victimization mindset of seeing women as these creatures that need to be saved by the knight in shining armor.
How is that different than women explaining what a real man is?
Because women explaining what a real man is them shaming you to conform to what they want you to do and who they want you to be as a man.
That's a good follow-up question, because it's like, well, okay, men are shamed for mansplaining when they're seeing women in their traditional roles, but then women who are tired of getting mansplained to will turn around and shame a guy back into that traditional role when it's convenient to them. Then suddenly they're the victim and they want you to start helping them out, when previously they were like, we don't want you mansplaining.
Women explaining what a real man is sounds like nonsense. So I would say they have something in common. They're both nonsensical.
Who is the bigger simp, a male feminist or a chivalrous white knight who believes all women are sacred?
The feminist.
Why?
Both of them are just doing it to try to get in the person's pants. But the feminist,
the one that thinks
that's a tough one. I think it's probably around the same, to be honest. You know, it's like they're both being pretty simpy because they're both trying to, I guess, save the woman. You know what I mean? Like the chivalrous person is just like, let me do all these things for you, my lady, and all these kinds of things. Where the, you know, the male feminist is kind of like that nice guy who's like trying to be overly nice in order to get what they like. They're both. It's like the old lady says, you know, they're both doing it to try to get something from the woman in that way, and it doesn't come off as genuine. I don't think one is either more sympathy than the other one, because honestly, like the chivalrous white knight is like, those guys are the original blue pill. They're the knight in shining armor that comes to save women, and they both apply the double standards between men and women in favor of women. You know what I mean? But they won't like call them out in the same way that like the red pill guys will. It's two sides of the same coin there.
all women are sacred, because the worst thing you could do is pedestalize women and think that a woman is better than you, because you kind of devalue yourself when you do that.
How can we even call women sacred in a society that has done every single thing in its power to literally take away that which is sacred? You know, it's like the way something that's sacred works is like, you can't have, it's like a tree. You know what I mean? It's like you got the branches and the leaves on the top, and then, you know, there's the part that goes into the ground, and then it roots in to the same degree that you have the branching out on the top. You can't have something that's sacred without having a corresponding taboo. And literally, our society has spent the last, 40 to 50 years destroying everything that's sacred and bringing out everything that was taboo back into the light. Our society does not understand what's sacred. And then once we get rid of all these sacred ideas that eventually, that used to hold up sacred institutions like marriage up, once you get rid of that, the belief in that which was sacred behind that traditional institution, of course that institution is going to break apart and fall away. Now it's like, you can have someone just come out and twerk all up on the table, sometimes in front of kids and all this kind of stuff, because none of that's taboo anymore, because we lost all that which was sacred. So it's like, try to say women are sacred is ridiculous.
Isn't chivalry pushed by religious conservatives?
Yes, but chivalry is dead.
I think that feminists can be chivalrous. So that part I stand on. You know what I'm saying? I mean, to be chivalrous, I can be chivalrous to a little old lady and give her my seat on the bus, right? Same thing to define it, I believe.
Don't women define masculinity based on what benefits them?
Yes, absolutely.
So how are the traditional women any better than the feminist women?
Well, they all are beautiful and deserve to be protected, but at the same time, as men, we have to establish our boundaries, respect our own boundaries, respect women, protect women, and not deal with bullshit.
What is the difference between feminist women shaming men for being toxically masculine versus traditional women shaming men for not being masculine enough?
There's really no difference. Men can't really do anything to win. It's like no matter what you do, you're always going to take an L.
On the face of it, the traditional women are supposed to be better than the feminists in the sense of like, okay, if a traditional woman shames you for not filling your traditional masculine role, the assumption is that they're fulfilling their traditional feminine role, versus the feminist who is very clearly not fulfilling her traditional feminine role, but she's still expecting you to, right? So it's like, but the problem is that our laws are constructed in order to enable the traditionally feminine women to not have to fulfill those roles. You know, it's like they have the option to leave at any time, and the laws, no fault divorce, just backs them up at any time. So a traditionally, and then you got so many women who, you know, are undercover feminists, like the woman at the beginning of the video said, because what they'll do is they'll pretend like they're traditional women, you know, at age 27, 28, all of a sudden they're like, well, you know, I want a guy who provides and protects, and I want to be a stay-at-home wife, but, you know, they haven't been living that way. You know, they didn't decide to do that when they were in their early 20s before they graduated college. They've been living the best of both worlds. So what'll happen is a guy will get kind of caught up or trapped by investing in that woman, and then she pulls the plug on him later on after a few years. That great dragon will rear its head again, and then you're screwed.
It's crazy because the women, the modern women that are shaming men for being masculine, most of them are masculine. So it doesn't make any sense at all. It really doesn't.
It really doesn't. It's like, if you're a masculine woman, it's like, why are you trying to find... The problem is that a masculine woman will not step down and find a guy who's making less money than her or not as masculine, you know what I mean? And they won't be like, oh, that's okay, this still makes sense, let's pair up. They're going to look for a guy who's hyper masculine. Like, being regular masculine isn't good enough for them. You have to be like super masculine. So it's just, it's a hypocrisy, because then what they'll do is shame men for not being men at this point when they're acting like men themselves.
So how are the traditional women any better than the feminist women?
They're not. They're both shaming men into conforming to what they think is more beneficial to them.
Don't women define masculinity based on what benefits them?
I think everybody defines everything in the world on what benefits them. I mean, that's everybody trying to see the best for themselves. You know what I'm saying? That's human nature, I think.
The issue is that men are busy allowing both sides to define masculinity for them. But at this point, like she says, you know, everybody defines everything for their own self-interest, except for men at this point. And men need to take control of the reins and decide how to define masculinity for themselves at this point. Because if you go with what the left is telling you, that's only going to get you in a situation where you're serving someone. And if it's the tradcons are pretty much doing the same thing. The tradcon approach would have worked back when both sides of this were expected to fulfill their traditional role. Okay, then it worked. But we now live in a society where the laws do not back that up. That's not the case. There's no enforcement there. Going with the tradcon sort of playbook here just leads most guys into getting screwed, and that's how you end up with this red pill manosphere movement that has like gone basically mainstream now. The challenge with the manosphere is that everyone is fighting on how to define masculinity, and the manosphere has pretty much leaned into taking the traditional approach, but putting it on hyper overdrive, like become this super rich, successful person, become like super sculpted in the gym, all these kinds of things, which to be fair is just not attainable by most guys. So it's like the men that are in this position have to define masculinity in a way that is really going to benefit them.
So just because you're anti-feminist, does that necessarily mean you're pro-men?
No, not at all. I think both sides have an equal amount of women that hate men.
So why isn't misandry the problem rather than masculinity?
Misandry is a huge problem that no one ever talks about. All we talk about is misogyny, but it should definitely be talked about more.
What's the difference between feminists labeling anything they don't like as misogyny versus conservatives labeling anything they don't like as immorality?
There is no difference. It's always shaming what you don't want and shaming what doesn't fit your narrative. It's always shame, shame, shame.
It's ridiculous for someone to impose their religious morality on someone, use it to shame them. It just doesn't make any sense for a man to do that, a religious person to do that. It doesn't make any sense for a woman to do that. They're not making a better world. I mean, they're just like, the world should be like me. That's a pathetic kind of narcissism. That's a disease.
I think religious morality has its place, especially within the community of people who who all subscribe to that particular religion. The challenge is that we live in a society that has many different religions, many different ways of thinking. Unfortunately, we have to have laws that are able to envelope and be an umbrella that can apply to all these different groups of people. So you should be able to operate, in a marriage that's tied to your church or whatever, and go to them for guidance. But at the same time, we need overarching laws that can apply to everybody. And those laws need to be, what the tradcons are offering is to reform those laws in a way that it used to be in their religious morality. It's just, that's not going to work either, because unfortunately that family law, if it's going to be reformed into something that takes into account both sides and helps protect both sides in the contract, it's going to have to be secular.
I think that the masculine women are trying to be something that maybe they don't necessarily fit into the role, so they're trying to change the role. And the traditional women are having a hard time because their role is going away. You know what I'm saying? It's like evaporating. Everything is very fluid right now. Everything is changing.
Aren't they both coming from a self-righteous ideology?
Just like men, it's no different. Everybody's got the self-righteous ideology, if you think about it. Unless they're totally insecure and you know what I'm saying, and can't stand up for themselves, those are the only people that are not trying to see things from their point of view.
Who shames male sexuality more? Feminists for labeling men as sexual predators, or religious conservatives for shaming sex outside marriage?
I think the ones that shame sex outside of marriage, for sure, because they look at it as anybody that's not married is kind of committing a sin. And
if men want purity, wouldn't that mean men have to wait until marriage? And haven't we established men shouldn't be getting married under the current laws?
I do believe that if men want purity, it does mean waiting until marriage, but I am not up to date on the current laws.
The tough part, I think especially for Christianity, is typically in order to get the court to, in order to get the church to officiate the wedding ceremony so that these two people can be together without feeling like they're committing sin, it also entails that they sign the state marriage license contract, right? I think a solution for that is churches need to begin offering couples, that they can get married in the eyes of God, and that it's pure in that way without having to sign the marriage license contract. But I think right now they're tied together, which is what's causing this problem, at least for them on that side.
I don't believe that anybody should get married without having sex first, because if the sex is no good, the marriage won't last, period.
I don't think you have to wait to marriage to find a pure woman, but I definitely think the laws need to change because they don't benefit us at all. Why would any man want to get married under the current laws?
Yeah, if you're going to wait for marriage to have sex, that's fine. That's how it traditionally was, but it also was traditionally that, a marriage could not just be broken without good reason, and adultery was one of those, impotency was one of those, separation for a long, like abandonment was one of those, all that kind of stuff. Nowadays, it's like a woman can commit adultery and still be entitled to half your stuff, where back then, if she did, that was actually encoded in the law as adultery. So the courts would be like, wait a minute, this person cheated on you. You get the bigger claim to the marital assets. And that worked both ways if that was proven in court. So it's absolutely slanted. So if women on both sides are expecting men to be the provider, protector, and finance most of the relationship, men should be given some protection in that contract, but they're not currently.
Why are conservatives still pushing for traditional gender roles in marriage without first changing the laws?
Well, marriage isn't set up for men to be beneficiaries if it ends. And regardless, in our society, women have always been the protected class.
Because even though the laws don't benefit us, there's a lot of profit in divorce. So it kind of benefits, a certain system for the laws to still stay in place, as messed up as that sounds.
They're just pushing for what they know. That's all. It's like they're stuck in a rut, and that's where they're going to stay. They don't want to expand their thought process. They believe what they believe is right, which is, it's not wrong. You know what I'm saying? For those people, let them do what they want to do. If you think it's wrong, or you think you should only eat fish on Friday, then for you, that's all you should eat. I don't feel that way, so I shouldn't be held to those standards.
That's kind of my issue with the tradcons is, I think they know something's wrong, but the answer for them is to to go backwards, and those original laws changed because society was encountering issues with them, and they're unfortunately not able to accommodate our new culture. We can't put the genie back in the bottle when it comes to feminism. So going back to their way of doing things isn't going to work. And we need to reimagine family law in order to be able to accommodate what we're dealing with now, so that marriage isn't as risky to both parties.
If being a masculine man means accepting the burden of others, why would anyone want to be a man by that definition?
You wouldn't, but the pressure is, no matter what the circumstances, no matter the situation, you as a man just have to take it and perform anyways.
Take it like a man?
Yes, sir.
A real man is not going to look at things as a burden. It's just certain things that you go through in life to get to where you want to get to, and sometimes you got to help other people out. It's not a burden. Everything is a lesson and and something to learn from.
I think people miss strong men. We look at the chaotic world we're in, the riots, people taking advantage and stealing, just going into a store. Doesn't the world want someone to stand up and say, knock this shit off? I'm not going to stand here and watch this anymore. It's wrong. I was put on this earth for a reason. I am going to fight it when I see it. That's what a man is. You want to call that toxic? You can. I don't.
If being masculine is a natural process, why are men often shamed to be sculpted that way?
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing of becoming high value, I think that's the main thing, right? Where it's kind of like you're shamed to become high value, and if you're not high value, you're low value, where there should be a middle ground of men that are still at a good place in their life, but still trying to become better each day.
Men are being hyper shamed to become hyper masculine nowadays, which really isn't realistic for most of the men. These laws used to be crafted in a way that was good for all of society. And that goes into his question earlier on about, is a man who's not masculine, can he still be considered a man? It's like you might not be the most masculine person, but you can still be valuable as a man. Unfortunately, now it's like the burden of performance the bar has been raised so high that there's a lot of people who just can't meet that. And the way our laws are set up now is that for the people in the middle, they're just going to get screwed over really freaking badly. So it's like we have to think of a new way to reimagine what the deal looks like, what the contract looks like. And all we're getting right now is this focus not on men's rights, but it's a focus on just masculinity. And the answer just continues to be a real man. And the goalpost for real man just keeps getting moved further and further and further away in order to justify what the other side of the equation has been doing, pretty much just doing whatever they want all of the time. Now that men are starting to step away from that and just say, all right, well, we can't meet these impossible standards. We're just going to do what we want. We're not going to, work as hard or whatever. We're not interested in this. People are starting to panic and they're like, where have all the real men gone?
Why should men continue to be placed into a sacrificial role when women have been liberated from their role?
You know what? Life is what you make it. Always has been, always will be. So men putting themselves into that role, that's the option. They put themselves there. If you don't want to be there, then don't be there.
Why?
And that's exactly what a lot of men are choosing to do nowadays.
Why was manhood always defined as a servitude to women?
Because the expectation is that a man should provide, regardless, that is your duty.
I don't believe it was. It's the opposite. I believe that women were defined as a servitude to men with that whole Adam and Eve thing, and she was made from the rib, and so she was supposed to be blah, 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 all that, yeah.
Yes, you can say originally we were both in servitude to each other, and men and women both had their traditionally defined roles, which entailed being in service to each other. However, the difference was that society used to back up those roles, and if anybody breached that, there would be consequences for whoever committed the breach, whoever committed the injury on the other party. Right now, we just have one side who's being held to a standard where the other side the standard's been completely obliterated. It's not even there.
Why is it that in the age of independent women, a man's value is often determined by what he provides?
Well, it's kind of hypocritical, right? Because these independent women can do everything by themselves, but yet they still want a man to provide. So there's hypocrisy there.
But like I said, that's changing some. I mean, there are some women that are out there making the money now, and the guy's staying home. So then it's by what the woman, by what the masculine role provides. How's that? Which doesn't have to be male or female.
Women, what we see is that they typically don't want to be that person who's providing for a man, and they want someone to be providing for them even when they have their career. But unfortunately, if they're going to live their lives in a more masculine role, then they have to be willing to take on some of the classical masculine duties and burdens that men generally had to take on, in addition to being able to have all these things. But for the most part, women don't want to do that. So if they're not going to do that, that's how you have the society we have now, where people aren't really pairing up the same way. Family units aren't being created or being able to stay together for that long. And we have to think about this and see how can we reform this instead of just giving up on it.
Why are we still promoting traditionalism when most women don't want to be traditional?
Yeah, most women don't want to be traditional, but the pressure is on us to still be traditional either way. Regardless of how they behave, we're still expected to stick to our gender roles.
Do women want to be independent while also being provided for?
Of course they do.
And if so, who's more delusional in their wants?
Woman, definitely.
Isn't that having your cake and eating it too?
Yeah, of course it is. It's delicious.
We put our blinders on and we see it as, this is amazing, I have a man that loves and cares for me. But also at the same time, women want to be able to be independent of themselves and work hard for themselves and be proud of what they've earned.
How are men supposed to be providers when they now have to compete in a job market that favors women?
Right, because women are going to get the job over you. So if you're expected to provide, how can you provide when the jobs are being taken from you?
Equality and equity. You got to understand the difference. And once society recognizes the differences, we can create a solution that everybody benefits.
If we push traditionalism, are we going to remove equal employment opportunities, which prevent men from fulfilling the traditional roles they're advocating for?
Yeah, they're definitely not going to change the laws. The deck is kind of stacked against us. The expectation is that we got to provide, we got to perform, but the laws kind of don't favor us at all to be even able to do that in the first place.
When I hear that question, all I hear is that, okay, if we're going to be traditional, are we going to be traditional all the way? Because that's the only way traditionalism works. And if the answer is no, then unfortunately saying that the solution is to lean more into traditionalism is actually going to be a net negative, because you're playing right into the hand of what the feminists want and just basically becoming a fat lamb for the slaughter by the other side once they finally get you with the courts and everything. They're not going to stop women's right to be able to work and to vote and all that stuff. The genie is out of the bottle. We are not going back. We cannot go back. Therefore, we need to think of something new. I mean, masculinity needs to be redefined. The laws need to be reformed. But all we get from the tradcon side is constant shaming that we need to go back to the traditional way. But they're not going to take it all the way to really put everybody back in their traditional roles. So it's just a complete waste of time. They're dodging the question. They're not providing a real solution.
If being a masculine man means accepting the burden of others, why would anyone want to be a man by that definition?
Because that's what we do. We go out there, we chop shit up, we blow shit up, and we handle business.
How does being masculine help men who are screwed over by the family court system?
It doesn't. You could be the most masculine person in the world. It doesn't stop you from getting screwed over by the laws, from getting screwed over from divorce. It doesn't stop anything.
They always favor the woman unless you have resounding evidence that woman was really, 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 really terrible. And even sometimes still that doesn't matter. So at the end of the day, you just got to have receipts.
The courts favor the women, especially financially, because men are still willing to take a deal where they're the ones who provide for the women, and they're not expecting the women to step up and bring 50% to this deal at least. So you're going to get screwed over every time if you sign that deal. If you sign that deal with the woman who makes more money than you, who's getting paid spousal support and child support when that divorce happens?
How does being masculine help men who are falsely accused?
It doesn't. The laws have to change. Masculinity isn't an answer to the laws in the system. The laws have to change.
If you are honorable and noble, which are traits that are associated with masculinity as well. Hopefully, prayerfully, inshallah, all those things will shine through.
Whether a man is masculine or not, doesn't he still deserve equal justice?
Absolutely, always.
So why is there so much focus about masculinity rather than men's rights?
Yeah, the masculinity agenda is pushed heavily, and we never focus on the laws, the actual problem that need to be changed and addressed.
Because at the end of the day, men have always made the laws. Men have always had the rights. Women couldn't vote. Women couldn't participate in certain things for a while. And after a while, those scales have to balance, and that's the time of reckoning that we are currently facing.
For all this talk about facing the challenge and manning up and taking on the difficult burden, the true difficult burden is looking at the laws, being honest about it, and calling for reform. But instead, most of the stuff you see is just like, let's shame this 304 or whatever, or let's shame this guy for not being high value. The actual hard task to take on is figuring out how do we lobby to get these laws changed, and nobody wants to do it, so they're all just kind of taking the lip service route, which is just focusing on masculinity.
What's the difference between feminist women shaming men for being men and traditional women shaming men for not being real men?
There is no difference. It's shame men, shame men, shame men, bring them down and make them weak and able to be controlled.
If you're trying to make a man be what he's not, that's objectionable. If you're trying to make him tougher, you're trying to make him weaker. It's just let him be what he is,
Wouldn't that equate modern misandry to feminism and traditional misandry to chivalry?
That's a very good point. Yes, absolutely.
Don't both place women at a status above men?
Yep, women are always up here and men are always down here.
Wouldn't that equate modern misandry to feminism and traditional misandry to chivalry?
Traditional misandry. God, this is like being on Jeopardy. Okay.
Both sides should be pursuing reform. Reform helps both parties. It helps the men and it helps the women. Women are making more money than they ever have before. Women are pharmacists now, they're nurses, they're all these other things, engineers, doctors. And if you keep the same system, those women aren't going to want to marry guys that are, even if the guy has a good job, but he's only making $70,000 a year, because to them that's not enough. They don't want to be on the receiving end of getting screwed over in the divorce court. You know what I mean? It's going to help the successful women from not getting shafted if they marry someone making less than them. And then it's going to help men also still want to be a provider, protector, and marry women who are making less than them. We have to dig deep under the hood of these laws and figure out how do we make this equitable in the new world that we're living in. The genie's not going back in the bottle. The women aren't giving up the vote. You know what I mean? They're not going to give up wanting to work and all these things. They want that. We have to accept that. And we have to move forward accommodating that, but making it a fair system for all parties involved. Unfortunately, the tradcons haven't swallowed that yet, and they need to understand this so that we can all move forward together. Anyways, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. If you haven't yet, check out It's Complicated channel, give him a subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.